We just experienced Upland's 28th city release and the second one in Europe with the release of London as well as Birmingham. London is the fifth Tier 1 city to enter Upland and the first one in over a year since the release of Los Angeles. In this video, I want to explain what this release means for Upland and compare London to the other Tier 1 cities that exist in Upland. The first one, of course, is San Francisco, the Genesis city, Manhattan, Chicago, Los Angeles, and of course now London. On April 27, 2023, Upland released London, which included the release of the City of London, which is located here, and the second borough of the Westminster Borough, which is the rest of this region over here. One day before that, two neighborhoods, which are Harrow Road and Queen's Park, were released as part of the stress test. These 35 neighborhoods are just the first release of London. London is much larger than this, and only about 20,000 properties were released. Now, for anyone who participated in the city release or are looking to purchase a property in any of these 35 neighborhoods that have been released to date, you will most likely notice that not only are the prices extremely expensive, but people were shocked about the original mint prices when comparing it to previous city releases and what we have experienced up to date with the Upland Metaverse. Now, before I talk about just how expensive this release of London was, it's important to note that Upland also released a Tier 5 city, which is Birmingham. One of the most important things about the Upland Metaverse is that they always want to have properties available for new players to come and enjoy the game. Now, when you start Upland, you get 4,500 UPX, which is the equivalent of $4.50. And with that, you should be able to purchase your first property. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to purchase a property in a city like London, but they do want you to have access to that city. So they like to open up lower tier cities, which are close by to these large hubs. And this is no different from the real world. Just like property prices in a city like Manhattan are extremely high, so a lot of people choose to live in a different borough, such as Brooklyn or the Bronx. The same is true in Upland. You may not be able to afford a property in London, but you might be able to afford a property in Birmingham and take the train in if there's something that you wanted to do in the City of London. Now, the City of Birmingham also had 70% FSA properties, which are for starters. Players who are visitors or uplanders are the only ones who are able to mint these FSA properties. So the fact that Upland did a double release, where the people who are interested in buying properties in a Tier 1 city, which are going to cost more, had the opportunity to do that, while players who were just starting out had a better option in going to Birmingham and being able to mint properties in that city. This graph here shows the total number of properties that exist in Upland in the different Tier 1 cities. So we have San Francisco as the Genesis city at about 160,000 properties. Manhattan, as we know, is an island, so the number of properties there are very small, only at about 40,000. Then we have cities like Chicago and Los Angeles, which are extremely large cities, close to 600,000 properties in each one of them. The Los Angeles release happened in February of 2022, and that was a very interesting release because they opened up half of the city on one day, and 1 week later, they opened up the other half of the city. So they released the entire 600,000 plus properties in pretty much one shot. And after that city release, it looks like they changed a little bit of their strategy on how they are releasing these cities. Since then, they have opened up parts of cities like we saw here in London, where they only open up a small amount of the city, and they say that they will release additional properties in the future as they expect for there to be demand for them. For example, the city of Rio de Janeiro had the initial release, but following that they had 3 additional city expansions. As Upland creates new partnerships in cities, they want to have additional releases and expansions where new players are still able to mint properties within that city. Now, just like London, you might not be able to mint the best spots, which is part of the downtown core. However, the entire city is much larger than the 20,000 properties here, and there will be other opportunities for people to mint within the city. Now, when I mentioned earlier that people were shocked to see some of the prices that we see in London compared to the other Tier 1 cities, this is the graph that explains it all. The y-axis shows the neighborhood value, which is the price in UPIX per up squared. So for those who are unfamiliar with this, I'm going to use this property in Knightsbridge and Belgravia as an example. And I minted this property in the London release, and it cost me 59,640 UPIX. And this is a really tiny property of only 15 up squared in size. So if you take the mint price and divide that by the up squared, you will get 3,976, which is the neighborhood value. And that means that every property in this neighborhood shares that same value. And that number is going to be multiplied by the size of the property in order to get the original mint price. Now, these neighborhood values are loosely representative of the actual land prices in that neighborhood. So going back to this graph, the 3,976 UPIX per up squared is this value right at the top of the graph. Now, how exactly do you read this graph? This is a pseudo box and whisker plot. If we take London, for example, the graph is built off of a line with the top and the bottom and a box somewhere in the middle. So the bottom point and the top point are the minimum and maximum neighborhood values for the different neighborhoods. So I just spoke about the maximum, which is almost 4,000 UPIX per up squared, and the minimum in London is just over 500 UPIX per up squared. Now, inside the blue box, which for London is between 1,000 and 1,500, that represents the middle 50% of the neighborhood values. So 25% of the neighborhoods have a neighborhood value less than about 1,000 UPIX per up squared. 25% of the neighborhood values are more than 1,500 UPIX per up squared. So half of the neighborhoods are located between that 1,000 and 1,500 UPIX per up squared. Now, every city has more desirable and less desirable places to actually live in, so you can expect there to be quite a large fluctuation between the cheapest neighborhoods and the most expensive neighborhoods. But what we can see here in London is such a huge range between the minimum and maximum prices. Now, I would imagine that when Upland decides to release additional neighborhoods in London, that blue box is going to grow in size. It will expand downwards, as I believe that in the future expansion, there will be more neighborhoods that will be a lot more affordable. I mentioned that at the same time Upland released Birmingham, and the neighborhood values in Birmingham were less than 180 UPIX per up squared. So you can see that by creating the pricing that they did, they really differentiated the two different cities and really creating a tier 1 and a tier 5 city. Now you can see here on these other cities, San Francisco, Manhattan, Chicago, and Los Angeles, that there really is something for everyone in all of these cities. For example, in Los Angeles, the majority of the properties are relatively cheap. Only 25% of the neighborhoods in Los Angeles have a neighborhood value which is more than 500 UPIX, and the least expensive neighborhood in London was more than the 500 UPIX per up squared. Having said that, property prices in Los Angeles were large because the properties that were leased in Los Angeles in general were larger than those that were released in London. I did not do any quantitative analysis on this, so it would be interesting if someone does have any data on that. But if you have a neighborhood value in Los Angeles of 500 UPIX per up squared compared to 1,000 UPIX per up squared in London, but on average the property sizes in Los Angeles are double that in London, then you're going to get approximately the same mint price for the properties. Now, when we look at San Francisco as a tier 1 city, this is a special city because it is the Genesis city and the very first one to enter the Upland metaverse. As they were onboarding the very first early adopters, and this was even before you were able to sell properties for US dollars in Upland, I'm assuming it was really important for them to have a very low barrier to entry in order to start playing this game. And that's why I think San Francisco properties across the board have relatively cheaper neighborhood values compared to these other tier 1 cities. The Manhattan neighborhood values are a lot higher, but I believe, again, this is not quantitative analysis, but the property sizes in that city are a lot smaller. So I think that the original mint prices of these properties are still relatively small. Now, the city release of Los Angeles was the first tier 1 city release that happened after there was quite a large influx of the number of players starting to play Upland. Now, as I explained before, again, they released the entire city of Los Angeles so that there really was something for everyone. There was lots of FSA properties and non-FSA properties in neighborhoods with a large range of neighborhood values. Moving forward with the approach that they're taking now of releasing what seems to be the most popular area in the downtown core of these new cities when they announce that there will be future expansions, Upland is going to be able to create this differentiation between the downtown core having an extremely high neighborhood value, while in parallel also releasing a tier 5 city, which might be in close proximity to this one, but will provide an opportunity for new players to start playing Upland in a more affordable way. So I think that in future tier 1 city releases, and I'm talking about the initial release, not future expansions, but these future city releases, we can expect to see comparable neighborhood value prices to what we are currently experiencing in London. As Upland continues to grow, they will be looking to cater to all sorts of different customers, whether it be players who want to play for free, and that probably means starting out in a tier 5 city and seeing how players are able to grow and advance from there, all the way up to players who are looking to spend thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in this platform. And these players might be comfortable spending hundreds of, or thousands of dollars even on a single property or on specific assets within this game. And with Upland saying they're looking to recreate the real world in the metaverse, that's exactly what they're trying to do. In the real world, not everybody's looking to pay millions of dollars on a property. They might only be able to afford an apartment. They might not even be able to afford a piece of land and they might be forced to rent. But in Upland, they're really trying to create an experience where everyone can come and enjoy it. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be able to own a property in downtown Manhattan or downtown London, but that everyone should be able to have access to those places. With things like meta ventures and dev shops and neighborhood ratings, there are lots of ways for players to get involved and engaged in different communities. A common misconception is that you don't need to own an expensive piece of land in order to provide value to the community and the ecosystem. And that's what I think is great about Upland. There are many different ways that you can play and different strategies that you can adopt in order to succeed in the metaverse. With exciting announcements like city releases of London and other large cities in the future, people can get a lot of FOMO experience, fear of missing out, in these city releases and opportunities to get some really cool properties. But it's important that you set your long-term vision and goals within the metaverse, and it's possible that a city release like London doesn't fit in with what you're trying to accomplish in the metaverse. So, in my opinion, it's extremely important not to be comparing yourself to other players because every other player has a different strategy and a different goal in mind, how much money they're willing to invest in the game, and or how much time they're willing to invest in this platform. So it's really difficult to look at other people and try and emulate them when your circumstances are not necessarily the same as theirs. Let me know what you think about this video, and do you think the base prices in London were too high, or do you think they're just right?